going to do today is talk about conversion of waste to energy, and I'll be speaking about what we call biofuel cells and bioenergy. So my name is Abhijeet Borole. I work at the Oak Ridge National Lab, and I'm in the Biosciences division. And I would like to acknowledge contributions from one of your master teachers, Jennifer Terrell. She's been helping me all through to make this some of the slides that I have up there, so that I can convey the message that we are trying to do of conversion of waste to energy to you very well. And also Julia Abbott and Bo Cumberland for some of the, we have some videos in here that you're going to see, and they helped us prepare them, so I'm very thankful to them for that. So let's get started. And so why are we here today? I want to be able to show you the cool side of biology. I don't know how many of you really enjoy biology, and what I would like to do is introduce you to some of the concepts of biology which will make it interesting. And why is biology important? Because our lives depend on it. You know, everything we have in our body, around us, is related to biology. And also our Earth. You know, there are a lot of things that are happening on this Earth, including global warming. Many of them are related to biology. So I'm going to try to introduce some concepts about waste, energy, so that you can relate to some of the things you do in school, to some of the scientific work that we do. And maybe you will see, maybe that will excite you to learn more and look at biology from a different way. So what we are going to do, our objectives today are to look at, learn about waste to energy conversion, understand how living things generate energy. Everything that we walk around, you know, microbes are there in the environment, animals, plants, everything is there. Everybody requires energy. So how is that produced? So we'll talk about some of those things, and why is energy important? As I said, because we need energy for each and everything we do. We will talk about how human body makes energy, and how that's also a form of bioenergy. We'll talk about that, and then discuss how microbes can produce energy, and how can we use them to really convert waste to energy. And then at the end, we will see why is that important, what's the impact of that. So as I said, you know, I don't know how many of you think biology is interesting, and I want to be able to try to make it interesting for you. So you know, don't make it dry. We want to have a really mud bath with biology and get soaked in it. So let's see if we can have some fun. So I'm going to talk about, I have 3 sections to my talk, and we'll have breaks in between them. The first one is going to be about bioelectricity. And we're going to observe and explore models of bioelectricity production, and the devices which we can use to make them. The second one is about, in general, bioenergy production by living cells and microbes. We're going to talk about that. And then some of you might have heard about ATP, which is how energy is stored in our body. And then we're going to talk about biological nanowires. All of these are new terms, but don't worry. I'll explain them to you as we go along. And at the end, we're going to see how to convert waste to energy in the third section, and how we can impact our world by that. So the first section, as I said, is on bioelectricity. How many of you know what is a fuel cell? Just raise your hands. Okay. So some of you have heard about it. Fuel cells are used in, as you know, in some cars. Instead of having gasoline engines we have in our automobiles right now, in the future we can have fuel cells. And how do they work? So this is a picture of a fuel cell shown here. A fuel cell has actually uses hydrogen as the gas or the energy source to run your car, or to make energy. So So what happens is you have an anode and you have a cathode which is separated by a membrane. So that's what a typical fuel cell is. What's an anode and what's a cathode? Anode is where you have a one chemical reaction where hydrogen is consumed and produces protons and electrons. These may be a little heavy for you, but essentially what you're doing is in the anode you have a catalyst which breaks the hydrogen atom and produces protons and electrons. And then on the cathode side you provide oxygen which combines with the protons and electrons to make water. And in the process you produce a flow of electrons from the anode to the cathode. And when you have flow of electrons and you connect those two sides, you have electricity. That's how you produce electricity in a fuel cell. Okay? But this is a conventional fuel cell. By conventional, I mean what is being developed for using in cars using metal catalyst. And the catalyst that is used in these cells is platinum. Everybody probably knows about platinum. It's a noble metal, it's a precious metal, and it can catalyze this breaking up of hydrogen atom into, or hydrogen molecule into protons and electrons. Okay? But our Earth has limited resources of platinum. Okay? If all the cars that we have on the road in the world are converted to the fuel cell cars, we won't have enough platinum. So we can't really do that. So we have to develop different catalysts. So what we're going to talk about today is can we find better and cheaper catalyst to make the same concept, to make energy from something that we have, an energy resource. Okay? And that energy resource, in this case it's hydrogen. Can we also replace that with renewable energy, like just using plant biomass? We can grow plants on Earth. Can we use plant biomass to really make energy? So we'll talk about some of these concepts. So now I would like to introduce you to my best friend in the lab. He's called Electrodude. Okay? He is the main character of our talk here. What he does is he actually produces electrons and electricity. Okay? So I'm going to take you to his home and show you what he does there. So this is actually so I have a cartoon here which I'm going to take you step by step to show you how this dude actually produces some electrons and electricity. So what happens is, I have two kids, little kids, littler than you, and my son, he always loves candy, sugar. He will leap on it. So it's the same with this guy, Electrodude, and I'm sure most of you. So when you give him some sugar, what does he do? He eats that sugar and he basically digests it completely. He makes carbon dioxide. But what happens in the process? Actually, why does our body like sugar and so much? And we have evolved to be able to consume and produce energy from it. Okay? Same way, this guy also produces energy. What he does is, in addition to that, he's also actually able to produce electrons, which because I will show you later on how this happens, the chemical reaction. But basically sugar or food, it's broken down. It has carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. It's a molecule of these elements. And the microbes, the Electrodude, is able to break it and produce electrons, protons, and CO2 from it. And in addition to that, this microbe produces what is called biological nanowires. So these are basically, you consider, if you ever touch a live wire, you can transfer electrons. What this microbe does is able to transfer electrons that are produced from breaking down this into to an electrode through these biological nanowires. And in the process, it also produces protons. And what happens in this cell is that the protons are also transferred. Once they are produced, they go to the other side. What I'm showing here is this is the anode. Like we saw in the earlier slide, we provided hydrogen. In this case, we are providing sugar. Okay? And the microbes are able to break them down, produce these electrons and protons, and they transfer from the anode. The electrons go to the anode electrode. The protons go through what we have here is a membrane separating the anode and the cathode. And they go through this membrane to the other side, which is the cathode. And the electrons are then, once they reach the anode, they actually require an oxygen at the cathode side to be able to transfer to the other side. So once you have an oxygen, you have the electron transferring through the external circuit to that. It produces water, and that results in producing electricity. Okay, that's how it works. So once that happens, you produce a water molecule, and that's the end of the story. So this is what keeps happening in the microbial fuel cell. So I've shown you this in terms of Electrodude's home, but this is actually our microbial fuel cell. That's how it works. And so I'm going to show you a movie which is slightly more the same concept, but this is actually a real biofilm that is growing. And biofilm is essentially where you have multiple layers of these Electrodude microorganisms on an electrode. So what they do is they actually, as I showed you, they connect with these electrode and they grow on it, and they produce these nanowires going all the way to the electrode, and that's how they transfer electrons. And what you see here is an actual biofilm, and through which the electrons are transferred and producing some electricity. We try to combine some real pictures with some additional cartoon to show you how it works. Let's see if it works. It doesn't. So I'm going to hold on. Let's see. I have to do it in this screen. So basically, you're going through the biofilm here. The black thing you see is the electrode, similar to what you saw in the last. So when you provide sugar molecule, produces electrons and protons. The electrons go through those green connections, which are the nanowires, to the anode electrode. Proton travels through the membrane, goes to the other side, and produces water, and that's how you make electricity. Okay. So I hope everybody got that. I can stop at this point, and if anybody has a question, I can try to answer. Is that clear to all of you? Any questions? Okay, very good. All right, so let's continue with. Okay, so I'm going to talk about next what actually these things look like in the lab. Okay, when we are making these things and devices to make our electricity. So this is a representation of a microbial fuel cell. You have a anode, biological anode, a cathode. When you provide organic carbon or a resource, it converts that into electrons and protons, and you produce electricity. So what you need is an organic carbon and versus hydrogen. So as you know, hydrogen is not necessarily a renewable fuel. Right now we produce it from natural gas. Okay, so hydrogen can be produced from organic matter also, but that's still being developed. So we don't have that. And the catalyst here, we've also found a way to replace platinum, because we're using bacteria, at least on the anode side, to break down our molecules of sugar into electrons and protons. So this is what it looks like, and I'm going to show you this. We have it in our other room, and we're going to discuss this cell over here. You can look at it and see how it actually feels. Now, going a little bit towards applications. Okay, so now you understand what's a microbial fuel cell. What can we actually do with it? What can it make? So there are two things I want to talk about. One is called sediment microbial fuel cell. And what a sediment microbial fuel cell does is actually it can produce energy from the organic matter that has been produced in our environment, and as the rivers and waters wash down leaves and stuff and organic matter through the rivers, they deposit on the ocean floor and the river floors, they deposit all kinds of organic carbon, okay? And a lot of times that environment is rich in these organic matter, which is degrading. So what can be done, what has been done by scientists is that they actually introduce or put an anode in the sediment at the bottom of the river or ocean, and they put another electrode above in the water phase where there is some oxygen. When you do that, you're actually able to produce some electricity. Okay, I will show you some examples on pictures of these things. The second one is what I call engineered microbial fuel cells. Now, when you have a sediment at the bottom, you cannot control, like for example, how much organic carbon is available to the microbes. Okay, how much oxygen is available to the cathode. You cannot control a lot of those things. You produce some electricity, but it's not much. So it produces low power. But it may be useful for something. I will talk about that. When we say engineered microbial fuel cells, we want to maximize. Everything is about efficiency and how efficiently you can do something. Because we have to put resources. In doing anything, we have to put resources down like anodes, cathodes, the housing for the cells to make that energy. And we have to be able to make that at a cheap enough cost so that it can be comparable to the current energy sources. There's always a debate about renewable energy sources and the cost of those, and whether they are cheap enough to be able to replace the cheap natural gas and oil that we are producing and we are used to using. Okay, so we have to always watch how much it costs. Okay, so what engineered MFC, what we are doing is we are actually, these are above ground, and so we are trying to design them, control how much carbon is provided, how much oxygen is provided, to maximize the electricity production. Okay, so I'm going to show you some designs of engineered microbial fuel cells as well later. But one thing I would like to point out is that neither of these are actually good enough for using in cars. And the reason for that is how much energy you produce from a given, say, one kilogram of a fuel cell. Okay, you have, because these are heavy, you have an anode and an electrode, and you have aqueous phase, water present in there. When you compare that with gasoline, okay, and an engine, they are producing less energy to a given weight. And on mobile devices like cars, you can't really have heavy things sitting there in the car to produce electricity, even though it may be cheap and renewable. Okay, so these are good for stationary sources, not for moving sources. All right. So sediment microbial fuel cells. So what are the sediment microbial fuel cells? As I talked about in the earlier slide, the organic carbon that is laid down in the sediments that is used and converted to CO2 and protons and electrons on the anode, and the cathode is placed in the upper region where you have some oxygen, and this results in producing some electricity. This can potentially be used as a bio battery for underwater energy harvesting. And the biggest advantage of this is that once you set it there, it'll last for years, decades. What Navy, US Navy does now is that they have to actually monitor maybe temperature, different things underwater. Okay, waves moving through, and so they have to collect all this data underwater in the oceans and be able to transfer that to the computers in there. So what they do is they put batteries at the bottom of the ocean to collect data. Now what this can do is actually replace those batteries, which needs to be, so a diver has to go down every year or two, replace the battery for them to get that data. And as we have global warming, and changes. There are changes in water flow, ocean flows, and there are ocean currents which are changing. So in order to monitor those flow rates and temperatures and all these environmental factors, it's very important to be able to do long-term monitoring. And this is one way of doing it. So this is actually showing a real device which the US Navy lab has produced and placed underwater to be able to generate electricity and collect data and transfer them through automated transmitters to the computers. So there is enough electricity there that it can be done to make that happen. So the second one I want to talk about is engineered microbial fuel cells. What I do in the lab is actually most of this, which is engineered microbial fuel cells. I show a few examples, and I have some of these in the other room. You can look at them. What we do here is actually optimize the, as I said, I talked about Electrodude, I talked about one organism. But in nature, there are thousands of microbes which can do this, okay? We need to find the one which are very efficient and very good and are able to use the energy source that we have, the waste that we have, okay? So we try to identify those and be able to use them in these devices. The second is engineered electrodes. So when you're flowing, when you're providing this carbon source, as you saw, how close the microbe is to the electrode makes a difference, and how they grow on the electrode is important. So we control all those things in order to make it efficient, okay? So that's an engineered microbial fuel cell. Now, where can we use this? We have been working on developing microbial fuel cells for various different wastewater applications. As you know, you may have heard about producing ethanol from corn or switchgrass. When you do that, you actually produce a lot of wastewater, okay? That wastewater, typically it will be sent to a wastewater treatment plant, where you have to actually, the usual process is to provide oxygen and degrade that organic matter. And you may have, some of you may have visited, treatment plants, and because I've gone with my kids to wastewater treatment plants, and so what they do there is to basically break down the organic matter we have in our wastewater. What this device can do is actually not only not require energy to do that, but actually produce some energy while doing that. So I think that's a win-win situation for everything. So we are developing some fuel cells to be able to treat wastewaters from biorefineries. In the future, we will be producing biofuels from different kinds of biomass, switchgrass, poplar, corn store, and stuff like that. So they'll take that wastewater and be able to actually produce some energy is going to improve the overall performance of these systems. Food industry. We actually, we spend a lot of money on food and waste a lot of food in this country, in restaurants, and even at home. Can we find a way to use that food waste and make some energy out of it? So we work on those kind of problems. So this is my last slide in this section, and what I want to show you before we go to take a break and go to that room is something similar to what you'll be doing. So this is the breakdown or disassembled microbial fuel cell. You'll be given all these parts, and we will have groups of 8 or 9, and you'll be trying to assemble this and actually see what's an anode, how electrode, and you connect it to this together. So you have an end plate here on two sides, anode side and the cathode side, and there's a chamber here, anode and the cathode. So you'll be introducing a electrode in here, placing the membrane in between, and then assemble the cathode and put it together. So I think that is my last slide. So there we'll stop. We'll go to the room and take a break and assemble the fuel cell. of the talk. And in this section, we're going to actually look at a little bit more in depth in terms of bioenergy production and some of the molecular processes that happen within the cells and within human bodies, and how we produce energy from different carbon sources and resources. So I want to start with discussing a little bit about energy. And when you were probably in lower schools, you learned about potential energy, kinetic energy, and then as you went through middle school, maybe you looked at mechanical energy, electrical energy. As you know, mechanical energy is simply the energy of say a moving vehicle. You have mechanical energy, and when you have that vehicle, basically you're transferring, you're burning gasoline in the engine, and that's transferring the energy to your vehicle, the wheels, and they're moving. So that's the mechanical form of energy. Electrical energy is basically when you have, you're using at home, everything that we have nowadays uses electricity. So that's easy to understand. The chemical and biological forms of energy may not be as clear, but we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then I want to mention energy carriers. So I just tried to simplify this what is the meaning of energy carrier, and basically into two forms, direct and indirect. So direct is basically a form of energy which is actually readily converted into energy, but the indirect one is actually requires some kind of a chemical reaction or processing to make it. So let's consider what are the energy carriers which come from chemistry. When you talk about gasoline, diesel, hydrogen, the fuels that we use in our cars, they're essentially indirect, because we basically, what we do is we burn these fuels, and that results in producing the energy which is then used to run your cars or get electricity and so on. Same with batteries. You have you connect them to you have chemical reactions going on between the two electrodes inside a battery, and that results in producing energy. When you look at physics, there are electrons which are actually direct form of electricity. They are actually conveying electricity. When they're flowing through the copper wire or semiconductors, this is direct electricity. Photons, for example, is essentially also another form of direct electricity coming from sunlight. Energized particles, radiation, is another form of direct energy. The reason I wanted to mention all this is because when we talk about bioenergy, there are differences in terms of I want to provide an analogy to what you are able to understand in terms of gasoline, for example, for running the car, versus a direct form of electricity which is flowing through the wire. So in biology, we have a molecule called ATP, adenosine triphosphate, and that is the primary energy molecule of most living systems, which is used by the body. So it is produced from different resources, and then it is used to operate our muscles, for moving by the bacteria and so on. And then there are these energy carriers, which are food or glucose. So they are like gasoline. So I want to do let's see. What I want to do is basically, I'm going to go through two different types of energy production systems, microbial systems and human body. How energy is produced by microbes, and both of them are kind of bioenergy. So we're going to look at how microbes produce electricity more closely than what we have so far in a microbial fuel cell, how that happens in nature, and what are the microbes in this sample, and how are they working. And then talk about human body and how we produce energy, and what is the relationship, if at all, and if there are similarities between the two in how living systems actually use energy carriers or resources of energy such as glucose and produce the energy, and what are the differences between our body and microbes in terms of energy production. So let's start with human energy or biological energy. So how does our body generate energy? So the reaction that typically happens is here. So you have glucose. This is the formula for glucose, C6H12O6. So when you eat something, you basically break that molecule down, and for that to happen, you require oxygen. And that results in producing CO2, water, and ATP. Now ATP is the energy carrier, and then we're going to look at how ATP is actually produced by cells in our body. We call it commonly burning of carbs, and we try to, and it's kind of true because it is very similar to burning. So I'm going to talk to you about what actually, how much truth is there in when we say burning of carbs, and how it really happens at the chemical and the biological level. So I want to do a small experiment here and see. So when we have this wax, this is a source of energy, right? Because when we burn it, it produces heat and light. So when I ignite it, it basically you have two things. You require two things. One is fuel and one is oxygen. Now there's another scientific term for oxygen, which I'm going to go into a little bit more depth in showing you, and it's called electron acceptor. Okay, we'll talk about this in a little more detail. So what is happening is here is simple experiment. You're burning up the wax and you're using oxygen from the air, and you're producing energy. Now, what will happen if I put the glass on top of it? Yes?
It will burn out its oxygen.
Right, so it's going to consume all the oxygen present in the glass in that area, and then it's going to extinguish because it doesn't have any oxygen. What happens if I lock myself in that glass or a bigger glass? Huh? I'll die. I'll run out of oxygen and I'll die. So are there similarities between these two processes? They are both what we call burning. Okay? Because what we are doing is in our body we have food, but if we don't get that oxygen, we will die. And so I want to show you some similarities between these processes and what are the underlying scientific processes that are happening, how they happen. So we'll just try this experiment and then see how it actually happens. So we'll leave it at that. Okay, it works. All right, so now I want to show you actually how our body, human body, takes the sugar and converts into ATP, or how cells obtain energy. So we'll go to YouTube and play a video, and so this is so convenient. 10 years ago we could not do this, right? Now we just look up a video, YouTube video, and you can understand how our body makes energy. So that's cool. All right, so let me see.
A mitochondria consists of two sacs made of membrane. Folds in the inner sac increase the surface area for chemical reactions that produce ATP. By breaking up mitochondria and separating out the membranes, biochemists have discovered exactly where the chemical reactions involved in synthesizing ATP actually occur. First, mitochondria take in molecules derived from food, molecules with lots of chemical bond energy. The breakdown products of sugars and fats. Sugar contains enough chemical bond energy to burn with a hot blue flame. Fat contains even more. Fat has about twice the energy content of sugar. If you can boil 1 test tube of water on a spoonful of sugar, a spoonful of fat will boil too. To understand how energy is extracted from these fuel molecules, we need to climb right inside of a mitochondria. In the space between the 2 sacs, fuel molecules are disassembled in a way that releases their chemical bond energy. This energy, in the form of electrons, drives molecular pumps embedded in the inner membrane. The pumps push hydrogen ions obtained from the fuel molecules into the inner membrane sac. It's like blowing up a balloon. It's during this process that oxygen plays its role. Oxygen has a powerful attraction for electrons. Think of the electrons released from fuel molecules as a stream of water. What oxygen does is lower the stream bed dramatically, so that the water, the electrons, can do a lot more work. Some bacteria can live in oxygen-free environments, but also have the ability to use oxygen if it is available. Without oxygen, the cell can make 2 ATP molecules for every sugar molecule metabolized. With oxygen, the same cell can make 36 ATPs from each sugar molecule. Oxygen's powerful pulling electrons allows most of the energy in their fuel molecules to be used to push in the hydrogen ions. The folded inner membrane is studded with enzymes. These enzymes, ATP synthase, offer an opening through which hydrogen ions can escape. As they exit through ATP synthase, they generate the energy required to bond the terminal phosphate onto ADP, converting it to ATP. That's it. That's how the ATP battery is recharged. But what happens to all those carbon atoms that originally made up the fuel molecules? In the process, they combine with oxygen to form CO2, carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide leaves the mitochondrion and escapes through the cell membrane, where it's picked up by the bloodstream and transferred to your lungs, ready for a good exhale. That's animal respiration. Oxygen in, burn fuel molecules, make ATP, carbon dioxide out. But how about plants? For them, it's carbon dioxide in, oxygen out.
Okay, so I'm going to stop here, so that was about ATP. Now, let's go back. So basically, what that showed you is the how the oxygen is important and how the glucose molecules and where they're actually converted into ATP. We're going to look at a little bit more detail and see how the ATP actually, you saw a small molecular machine there which is embedded in the mitochondrial cell wall in our cells, which is actually able to produce that ATP. So we're going to discuss a little bit more detail about the mechanism of that ATP pump. It is actually a pump, and you will see that how nature has evolved the system to be able to generate energy for our body to use. And I want to mention just a couple of things which I'm going to go back and discuss a little bit more detail. And that is, you heard about proton gradient and electron transfer. And those are 2 very important processes which actually run these pumps, the ATP pump and the electron transfer machinery inside the cells. So we're going to look at a couple more videos from YouTube and look at how the ATP pump works. And then we're going to discuss the proton gradient and electron gradient and the relationship between the 2. So let's go to the next video. And let's see, this is. All right.
The electron transport chain is an array of molecules, mostly proteins, built into the inner membrane of the mitochondria. NADH gives up its high-energy electrons to the first complex in the electron transport chain. The electrons move from one member of the chain to the next, giving up their energy as they are pulled from NADH toward highly electronegative oxygen. The energy given up by the flow of electrons is used to pump hydrogen ions from the mitochondrial matrix into the intermembrane space. Oxygen captures the electrons in the very last step in electron transport. The last complex adds a pair of electrons to an oxygen atom and two hydrogen ions, forming water. The electron transport chain has used the energy of moving electrons to pump hydrogen ions into the intermembrane space. This buildup of hydrogen ions, like water behind a dam, stores the potential energy that was originally in the bonds of glucose molecules. The backed up hydrogen ions give up their energy when they diffuse through a special protein in the membrane called ATP synthase. As hydrogen ions flow down their concentration gradient, ATP synthase captures their energy to make ATP. This mode of ATP production is called oxidative phosphorylation because it is powered by the transfer of electrons to oxygen. Under normal conditions, almost all the ATP produced in the process of cellular respiration is manufactured by electron transport and oxidative phosphorylation, about 34 ATPs for every glucose consumed.
This illustration summarizes cellular respiration. Glycolysis in the citric acid cycle produces small amounts of ATP via
Okay. The last video I have is actually about the ATP synthase pump. And let's see. 120.
ATP synthase is a molecular machine that works like a turbine to convert the energy stored in a proton gradient into chemical energy stored in the bond energy of ATP. The flow of protons down their electrochemical gradient drives a rotor that lies in the membrane. It is thought that protons flow through an entry open to one side of the membrane and bind to rotor subunits. Only protonated subunits can then rotate into the membrane, away from the static channel assembly. Once the protonated subunits have completed an almost full circle and have returned to the static subunits, an exit channel allows them to leave to the other side of the membrane. In this way, the energy stored in the proton gradient is converted into mechanical rotational energy. The rotational energy is transmitted via a shaft attached to the rotor that penetrates deep into the center of the characteristic lollipop head, the F1 ATPase, which catalyzes the formation of ATP. The F1 ATPase portion of ATP synthase has been crystallized.
Okay. Sorry. So I hope that will give you some idea about, how molecular level processes are so very similar in principle to, they talked about the analogy of a dam where you store water to produce hydroelectric energy. So as the water goes through the dam, you turn turbines and you produce electricity. We do this on a macro scale. The human body and the ATPase essentially does the same thing. We have discovered that it's able to do that, but on a very small level. And when you are able to do that on that nano level, you introduce a lot of efficiency. So I hope it will. Now I want to also mention, you saw microbial fuel cell. so there we are also having a membrane, and you saw the role of membranes in our human cells, in the mitochondrial cell wall, where the membrane is used as a partitioning for the dam. We are able to use similar concept in a microbial fuel cell. However, we really don't have molecular pumps working in our fuel cell. Okay, so we have sort of reduced the scale of what we do on a dam, where you have water flowing, but in our fuel cell, electrons are flowing, and we have done that on a small scale. But the future is about these being able to do these kind of things and producing energy and producing pumps using these molecular devices and controlling them and making them do what we want to do to produce energy. And this is where, you know, all of you in 10-15 years are going to make a difference. And that's why biology is so cool, I think, where if you understand these processes and you find a way to control them, and you know, with genetic engineering and DNA analysis, you can actually make some of these molecular machines in the lab. But being able to harvest that energy and be able to produce electricity is something that I think it really excites me, and I think it's very cool. So let's talk a little bit more about what we understand so far in terms of the chemistry of energy production. And common to all of these processes that you saw in human body, in microbial processes, in fuel cells, in burning of the candle, in cars, you know, burning gasoline, the common process is combustion. Now, what is combustion made up of? There are two half reactions. Okay, half reaction means you basically split that chemical reaction by using electron as a partitioning. So here, oxidation is basically glucose conversion to CO2. And what we are doing is that taking that glucose and converting CO2. And then this essentially produces electrons. And on the other side, like in a fuel cell, you have oxygen, and that's where reduction takes place. So you have oxidation on the anode side, you have reduction on the cathode side. Okay? So, and what happens in the process is this redox gradient is what is different in every process that happens which produces energy. In microbial processes, you produce, in microbial fuel cell, you are producing electricity. In our human cells or biological cells, you produce ATP. And that's the difference between the two. So I want to just take a slightly offshoot here a little bit, and I'm gonna, we learned something about human bioenergy and how human cells and mammalian cells produce energy. I just want to give a simple analogy here and talk about the redox balance. Okay, you may have heard, you know, from some people about balancing your intake and in your life. You want to balance your food intake, and for you to be healthy, you have to have a balance. And then what they're talking about is this. So when we eat food, you basically require oxygen and you produce energy. However, if you take too much food, what our body does is that it has enough energy, it has enough oxygen, okay? But it does not need any energy. So our human systems and living systems are very well controlled on the molecular level in terms of the needs of the body. So when you don't require energy, what the body does, it stores that new food that comes in. It may be candy, it may be, you know, soda, whatever you drink, and it basically puts that in, makes fat. Okay, so now what happens, and when you do that, when you have an imbalance, when you're taking more food than your body needs, your energy requirements, and that results in production of excess fat. And so I think you will see, I hope you will see the relationship of redox balance in our system. It's all related to this redox balance. You have excess energy source, you have excess electrons, and your body does not need that, and so it's going to make fat. And that's a primary cause of obesity. And it also leads to diabetes. And you hear about glucose control, insulin providing for patients which have diabetes. And our body is trying to fight. You know, you have this and it gets impaired in the process. And so it's all related to the food that you have. Your body controls the energy that you require and what it does with the excess food. So then I'm going to move on from human bioenergy to microbial energy. And what you see here is that basically I'm trying to show that in nature you have millions of types of microbes, okay? And they all have different types of energy production processes. Everybody has a different niche in where they live, okay? So our Electrodude lives in the microbial fuel cell and he does one specific thing. It is different from what happens by, say, E. coli in our body or in the environment. So what's the difference? There are two main categories. One is aerobes, microbes which use oxygen, and there are anaerobes, like Electrodude, which produce energy using different processes. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I want to show you a redox scale, okay? And the differences come from different types of, I mentioned oxygen in all of this so far. Now, besides oxygen, we cannot use any other dump for electrons. You saw that in the redox process, when you have glucose, what you're doing is basically transferring electrons from glucose while it makes CO2. So glucose is a reduced molecule, CO2 is a fully oxidized molecule. To make that energy, you have to transfer electrons, and molecular processes use membranes to do that. Now, when you're talking about redox scale, besides oxygen, microbes actually use a number of other things to dump those electrons and produce energy when you don't have oxygen. You think about environments in nature where there is no oxygen. Like I mentioned, sediment, and then there is underwater in the earth. So there are a lot of places where you don't have oxygen. What microbes have evolved to do is use other things to dump those electrons, okay? And they result in different amount of energy production. So when I give you a lot of, here I have simply put, you know, my son who's sitting right there, he likes this vanilla from Wendy's, and if I give him a big cup, he's very happy, right? It's the same thing with microbes, and I will show you how that relates to these different electron acceptors. So you have oxygen, and we looked at one of the things is that the video mentioned was producing 36 moles of ATP when you have oxygen, and only 2 moles of ATP when we don't have oxygen through anaerobic processes. It's the same process. So when you have oxygen, you're very happy, you have a lot of energy, okay? When you don't have oxygen, these are the other things that the microbes can use. Nitrate, sulfate, they are present in our environment, in nature, in soil. And microbes can use some of these things to produce the energy that they need. And that's why they're able to actually take a lot of waste material, like plants decaying. You know, what happens to all the fall leaves that, you know, fall down every year? We don't see them next year in 6 months. They're all gone. And they're basically broken down by microbes, some of them anaerobic, which use these other electron acceptors below the ground level and produce energy. So one thing to this slide has a message is the energy produced is actually proportional to the redox gradient. Now, this Electrodude is actually what we call it is Electrode Jen. This is a scientific name that scientists have given this Electrodude. What Electrode Jen basically does is it has this, I mentioned to you, nanowires through which it is able to transfer electrons from the cell to the electrode. And this is how a nanowire actually looks. Now, I won't go into the details of that, okay? But I want you to understand that when you're able to produce, if you're able to actually find a way to produce these nanowires, there are so many applications that you can perceive you can change this world. As you all know, iPhone has changed our world in the software, in the hardware industry. I think in the future, you know, as energy becomes more and more limiting, as our human population increases, we will have to find new sources of doing that. And new ways of, the reason this is important is because it has potential applications of interfacing biology, what the nature can do very efficiently using different carbon sources, different waste materials, different electron acceptors, and be able to use that energy to run devices which are, if you're able to do that, interfacing. And I think biological nanowires may be a key where you may be able to connect biology to electronic devices like iPhones or something in the future. So if we can do that, and I don't think I'll be doing that, you all will be doing that. So you can potentially someday use these things. Now we're using semiconductors, we're using the silicon wires, and you're getting to the smallest possible size of silicon wafers and chips that you can produce to make these transistors. If you can do that using biological systems, where all you have to do is drop a solution into a tube, and next day come and harvest the nanowires, or you won't require all these expensive, you know, controlled machinery, temperature controlled devices. Nature can do it very easily, and we have to be able to harvest that. So that's the cool part of biology, which I like. The last section we're going to look at is the big picture, where estimating energy production from waste and its impact. So we're going to go from all the way molecular level that we were talking about to big, you know, waste water systems and stuff that we produce. So I mentioned food waste, restaurants, homes, plants and natural carbon cycle basically take care of it, but we are exceeding the human population that our environment can handle. We are 7 billion right now. In 2035, you will be 9 billion inhabitants on this earth. 2 billion people go hungry every day. Think about that. So we have to be able to develop creative ways to generate energy from waste using natural processes. And American population is, US population is 300 million. We really don't need this as much as the rest of the world needs. But we do like our lifestyle, right? Nobody wants to give up our energy consumption, which is the highest in the world. How can we get over and get to be able to keep our lifestyle? Because I think the way to do that may be through developing these systems and providing them to the world which requires that, the 2 billion people. And if America is so, you know, it has all the resources it needs. It needs to basically design the systems and implement them for the rest of the world. And that's where, you know, you will generate white collar jobs. And that's where I think in the future we'll be able to contribute to a healthy system instead of having a lot of the problems we have right now. So I'm going to go a little bit more into the wastewater treatment. How can we use microbial fuel cells? As you might have visited some of these plants, they have, you know, they separate some of the dirty stuff. They take that, try to burn it off using oxygen, and then you produce clean water. You discharge that to the rivers, lakes, and then we try to recycle that to clean it to get drinking water. And a typical process, what they call used in the wastewater treatment, is aerobic and anaerobic digestion. And what that is, digestion is nothing but a way to eat up all that organic matter and waste that you have and make CO2. Okay? So microbial fuel cells is one way of actually taking that waste and producing some energy instead of running anaerobic digesters or aerobic digesters where you have to pump energy to provide oxygen. In this case, as I showed you, you don't have to pump oxygen. You can have, like some of the devices we have made, we use air cathode. It does have some costs, which are different, but there's a way to make energy. So what we're going to do is assess the impact of this waste to energy. We're going to look at our local wastewater treatment plant and how much waste we produce and see how much energy we can produce from it. Okay, so we have about 44 million gallons per day of wastewater handled by the wastewater treatment plant present in, which is located in the University of Tennessee campus. And so I'm going to shift gears and let your teacher tell you, because this is something which I definitely need her help on, because I can't come to really discussing these. She's going to simplify things very easily, so you can actually find a way and easily be able to convert the wastewater flow and determine how much energy you can produce. So she's going to explain how to do that.
So the whole point of these microbial fuel cells is to make sure that we can use bacteria to break down wastewater, which is not being used for anything, and make energy that we can use for something. Energy is measured in megawatt hours per day. This is a measure of how much energy we can produce. But in order to find out how much energy we can produce, we have to know how much wastewater we have. If we have a lot of wastewater, do you think we can produce more energy or less energy? Are you awake? More energy, right? Well, how much more energy per volume of wastewater? So we're going to start with an amount of wastewater, which is measured in millions of gallons per day. Millions of gallons of wastewater. That's ridiculous. That's a ton of waste, right? So we're going to put it to use, making energy out of it. We have to be able to convert millions of gallons per day into how much energy in megawatt hours per day. This is a weird conversion to do, so we have a way to do that called dimensional analysis. Have you done dimensional analysis before? Does this look familiar to anyone? Some nods, some yeah. Good, okay. So the way we're going to do dimensional analysis is you're going to start with the units that you have, the units of your known measurement, which for us in our example with Electrodude, we know how much wastewater we have. But we want to convert that into a new unit, which is an energy unit. So let's look at an example really fast. If I wanted to convert seconds, I want to find out how many seconds are in a day. That's my end unit. That's what I want to have at the end. Seconds per day. I have to start with a known value, something that I already know for sure. Let's say that I know there are 60 minutes in 1 hour. Do you know that? I got to get 60 minutes in an hour and find out how many seconds there are in a day. I'm going to use something called an equality. 60 minutes is equal to 1 hour. You can agree with that, right? We want to fill in each blank on our dimensional analysis with something else that's equal, another equality. But I need the units to change from minutes per hour to seconds per day. So basically what we want to do is cancel out units. Since I have 60 minutes on the top, I need to put a minute value on the bottom to cancel out things on the top cancel out units on the bottom. So I'm going to ask myself, how can I cancel out minutes? I know there are 60 seconds in 1 minute. Those are equal, right? This is inequality. Now that I know that, I see that my minutes cancel out. And I have 60 seconds over 1 hour. So I have the top value, I have seconds, that's what I was looking for. But I need to get the bottom value, which is per day. So how can I turn my hours at the bottom into a day? What's the equality for hours per day? 24 hours in 1 day, good job. So I can fill that in and make sure that my units will cancel. My hours on the bottom cancel with my hours on the top. And when I look, I'm left with seconds on the top and days on the bottom, and that's what I wanted. So what do I do with these numbers that I filled in my dimensional analysis? You told me you've done this before. Very good. Multiply the numbers on the top, multiply the numbers on the bottom. Can any of you do 60 times 24? I might have heard something get close. So we've got 86,400 seconds in 1 day. And we were able to convert our starting value of minutes per hour into seconds per day. And that's exactly what we need to be able to do with math to convert the amount of wastewater that we have into the amount of energy that we can produce. Make sense? You're going to try it in a minute. All right, let's do the real conversion.
Okay. So, thank you. So I'm going to try to go through this calculation, and what we're trying to do is determine how much energy we can produce from the wastewater that our Knoxville wastewater treatment plant handles every day. So we have 44 into 10 to the 6 gallons per day. So we multiply that to try to convert it into liters per day. So we multiply that by 3.785, which is the conversion factor for going from gallons to liters. Just like Jennifer explained, we're going to do that at each step. So we're going to go from gallons per day to liters per day, and then liters per day, we want to figure out how much organic carbon is there. So once we know the flow rate in liters per day, we're going to multiply that by the organic carbon present per liter of wastewater. So that's 0.2. So you multiply that and you get 33 into 10 to the 6 grams of organic carbon per day. So from there, now we're trying to go to how much electricity is produced. So the next step is to convert that grams per day into moles of electrons per day. So that's the conversion factor there is 30 grams per mole of organic carbon. The way the reason it is 30 is because that's the molecular weight of average organic carbon. Okay, so and you calculate that by using this equation here, which is CH2O is my average formula for organic matter. You convert that into you have 12 is the molecular weight of carbon, 2 for 2 hydrogens, and 16 for oxygen. So you get 30 grams in 1 mole of organic carbon. So now we want to convert that organic carbon into electrons. Okay, so we saw the equation earlier when we converted, say, glucose to CO2 and few electrons. So we know that when you convert this CH2O into electrons, you have 4 electrons per mole of organic carbon. So we go from there to convert that into moles of electrons and multiply it by 4. So that gives you 4.44 into 10 to the 6. Now we convert that using we want to convert it from per day to per second. That's what was explained by your teacher in the earlier slide. So we do that and we get the number of moles of electrons per second. Now once we know the number of electrons per second, we're going to convert that into megawatt hour per day. And for what we are going to do in your exercise is you have the earlier slide, we're going to give you a worksheet and you're going to calculate how much moles of electrons you can produce from a given amount of wastewater. And we're going to do this for each state. So each one of you will get one state. So I will give you how much wastewater is produced in every state. You're going to calculate how many moles of electrons produced in that state per second, and then we multiply it by conversion factor, which converts moles of electrons to megawatt hour per day. And this, I will not go into these calculations, but I'll give you a factor to multiply, and you convert that to megawatt hour per day. Then we're going to come back here, and we're going to plot that on the map US to figure out how much energy can be produced in different states. Okay, so let me see what else we have here. All right, so that's what this slide says, and this is the worksheet you're going to get, and you're going to convert that into the megawatt, the million gallons per day into moles of electrons per second. So let's go to the take a break, and we'll go there and we'll do that calculation, and there'll be volunteers to help you. We're going to resume our slides here, and so I think I hope this exercise was educational in terms of trying to understand the dimensional analysis and how can you convert a given flow rate for wastewater into energy. At least you see how the process in being able to do that, and how engineers calculate. It's too much static here. Okay, so let's continue to this. So what you have done here is basically each of you calculated the amount of energy that can be produced from each state, and what we have done is basically connected all the data you entered to this computer. So the circles that you see are basically relative in terms of different states, and they show you where you're basically producing megawatt hour, which is the highest. So you can see that Texas and probably some of the northeastern states have the highest amount, and this is actually just proportional to the population of that particular state, and that's why you see a bigger energy production in the state of Texas.
I think the battery may be going dead, isn't it?
Probably just a few more minutes.
If it does again, just you can mute it. Yeah, I think it's good.
Okay. All right. So so we're going to do just a brief analysis and look at how really that impacts and what does it mean, the numbers that you have produced, what does it mean in terms of energy production. So first we did an example of a Knoxville wastewater treatment plant, and we got about 24 megawatt hour per day. Now what does that number really mean? So what I've done is try to convert that into how much energy or how much power that is for a house. So in one home you require about 31 kilowatt hour per day. Okay, so now you can calculate how much energy is produced in that particular place, and how many homes you can power using that electricity that you have produced. So for the Knoxville wastewater treatment plant, for example, it's sufficient to power about 750 homes, the electricity that you produce. So you get an idea of how much impact it can have. Okay. For the Tennessee, for example, we got about 725 megawatt hour per day. That's equivalent to powering about 23,000 homes. For all of the US, we combine all the data that you generated and put it together. That's enough to power about 1.4 million homes. So you can see now that this is not minor. It can have even though it's not very high, but it has some effect. Now another equivalence I can tell you about is that we human population generates wastewater everywhere, and you require energy using the conventional way to treat that water to get clean water. It takes about 4% of the US total energy use to just clean the water, the dirty wastewater that is produced by the human population. Okay, that's an average number for all of US. So essentially what it means is that you can either use that power to use it for homes, or actually in the reverse way, you can use that energy produced at the wastewater treatment plant to run that plant. Okay, so now we're using 4% of the US energy to do that. If you're able to do this, you can potentially do it for no energy, because this is actually producing energy. So I hope that makes it clear in terms of, and 4% is several megawatts, as you can see, and that's not an insignificant amount. So that gives you an idea of how much impact it can have if we are able to develop such a technology, and how it can impact the waste to energy. You basically get rid of waste while at the same time reducing your energy conversion. Okay, so one other thing I want to mention to you is that this is also related to greenhouse gases and global warming. And the reason is that the 4% energy that is used right now to clean all that water, it comes mostly from fossil fuels. Either by burning coal, or the wastewater treatment plant uses electricity, which is obtained from burning either coal or natural gas or petroleum and things like that. So that results in producing carbon dioxide, which goes to the environment. Now if you're using renewable resources and the wastewater to do that, it really reduces your CO2 release by that much amount. Now I've just given you a equivalent here. So if you have 1 megawatt electricity production from a microbial fuel cell, you will reduce the CO2 production from fossil fuels by 250 tons. Okay, so maybe if you are interested, you can try to use the numbers we have given, and this presentation will be on the website, so you can go back to the 2 slides I had and try to figure out how we came up with this equivalence, and all the data is in there. So this is kind of a homework if you want to do that. Okay, so moving on, I think that was my last slide of section 3. So I'm going to just summarize what we have done, and that'll be the end of our discussion, and open the floor to questions. So first thing we learned is how does the electrogens produce electricity and electrons. Then we looked at microbial fuel cells, see how it works, and how microbes produce electricity. And then we looked at the human body and how it is some of the molecular processes have an underlying basic principle of redox balance and combustion, so there is similarities between energy production processes no matter how you're producing energy. And then finally we looked at waste to energy conversion and its impact. And so I think the purpose of this session is basically for you to get some idea of how the science you're doing, how what you study in school is related to real life, and why it is important. For example, why is biology important? And I hope you will understand the relationship between the science and what we do in our daily lives, and how can you do things to improve it, not just the energy production and things on, but your own lives, by really developing some of these technologies and contributing and showing interest in doing these things. So hopefully, I hope this has been helpful, and I will stop here, and if you all have questions, I can take now or later on. I'll be around. So.